Hey guys, Jack here. Thanks so much for all the support on the episode so far. Today's episode is with Robert Degle. So we filmed this one on the way to the airport. So we have no video, it's just going to all be audio. And I'm also joined by two co-hosts, Justin Bean and Lockie McCoster. So hope you enjoy. Thanks guys.
All right, so welcome back to episode 6, I believe, of the Kickback with Jack podcast. Today I am joined by world-class jiu-jitsu grappler and philosopher Robert Degle. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome, mate. So we've been having a few chats beforehand, but I guess we'll start off. For the people that don't know you, who are you, Robert?
So I'm a 33-year-old Italian American guy. He's been living in Asia for a while, Vietnam last year, and I just moved to Australia. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt, and that's what I do for a living. I teach jiu-jitsu. I was a grad student in philosophy before I did jiu-jitsu, and I'm still really interested in that. I mean, that's what we've been talking about in the car, basically, until now. Yeah.
And that's an interesting point. So we've been talking about philosophy. Do you think there's a link between, your love for jiu-jitsu and philosophy? Like, do you think they go hand in hand?
This is a question I've been asked a lot, and if I'm being honest, I'm not sure, honestly. I think maybe in a very abstract sense, in the sense that, I kind of like puzzles and stuff. I think jiu-jitsu is, a lot of it is, puzzle solving, and I think philosophy, I think what attracts a lot of people to philosophy, including myself, is that, you are confronted with the various mysteries of life and existence, and it's even if they don't really matter that much, you're just curious and you want to solve these puzzles, right? So in that sense, I think yes, but I don't think so. For instance, people have asked me, has it helped your jujitsu, your philosophical background? In a very abstract sense, but I think you could get the same kind of puzzle solving or problem solving skills from studying almost anything that's rigorous, like anthropology or economics or statistics or yeah, it's not what I'm saying is I don't think it's exclusive or unique to philosophy.
No, that's interesting. And it's you were saying before about how jiu-jitsu is sort of it's solving these puzzles, right? Do you think there's some sort of I don't know, a human element to being able to solve something and then you get that satisfaction after solving it that you get in jiu-jitsu that you also get in philosophy?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, okay, this is maybe another element that links them. In both cases, you never solve the problem, really. It's a temporarily solved problem. You're always kind of, in philosophy, very rarely do philosophical problems genuinely get, solved and answered, right?
Yeah.
It's mostly just lots of speculation and proposed solutions, and some people are convinced by those solutions and other ones are not so much, right? Similarly, in jiu-jitsu, you might figure out a solution to a specific problem, but then someone else is going to probably in turn solve the problem. You're gonna come up with a move that counters their move, and then they come up with a move that counters the move you came up with, and etc. It's a never-ending cycle. And in a sense, that's actually a lot of the history of philosophy was like that, right? Descartes, Hume responded to Descartes, Kant responded to Hume, et cetera, et cetera. And to some extent, it's a little bit similar to that, to what happened to jiu-jitsu.
And you're saying that there's not really an answer to things, right? So does that matter?
So let me explain what I mean by that. Right?
Yeah.
So before the podcast, we were talking about to me, when I think of philosophy as an academic discipline in Western English speaking universities, right? So generally speaking, I think it's broader than this, but I think most of the conversations are around what people would call metaphysics and epistemology. There's other areas of philosophy like ethics, aesthetics, and even politics can be categorized as philosophy, but I think metaphysical and epistemological questions are the where the bulk of that thinking is concerned, right? So metaphysics is the study of the nature of existence, and epistemology is the study of the nature of human knowledge, how it can be acquired, what we can say it even is, etc. Right? So I think metaphysics is very interesting, but in terms of studying it as in a philosophical way, I think it is mostly abstract navel gazing without any there's no if we're approaching questions of economics or statistics, we can establish certain measurements by which we can uh, you know, judge whether something is true or false, right?
Yeah.
Metaphysical questions like almost never have that. It's like, you know, it's a lot of it is what one of my favorite philosophers, Ludwig Wittgenstein, he would call it spurious metaphysical speculation. It is just mostly like, you know, like the dude from The Big Lebowski.
Yeah.
It's just like your opinion, man. And like honestly, that is like I think a lot of like academic philosophy is like, yeah, all right, that's just your like opinion, man. And maybe it's a very well thought out, well explained opinion, but it's still just like your opinion, man.
Mm.
And then epistemology, I happen to like epistemology a little bit more. Um,
Because it's more applicable to real life, or
I think that it's kind of like so for instance, like let me explain maybe a little bit more some of the issues I have with metaphysical speculation. Like a, a question that gets asked, it's a very standard metaphysical philosophical question, is like, does God exist? Right? And I think that this question is ultimately like it's a very in terms of like trying to answer it philosophically or logically, it is a very foolish question. It's the kind of thing that I just think is like you're never going to it the philosophical attempts to answer the question miss the point of why people search for God. Like
Yeah.
like the if you read religious people's accounts for what God means to them, it is not like um you're not answering logical questions. It's much deeper than that. It's much more mysterious than that, right? Like if you listen to someone like Andrei Tarkovsky, the Russian poet and filmmaker, or you read Fyodor Dostoevsky, the Russian writer, like these men, when they're speaking of God, are not talking about, well, you know, we've established that he's 7 feet tall and he has green hair, and you know, like it's not like logical descriptions of the world, right? It is a much more complicated, spiritual, even mystical thing that has something more to do with the meaning of man's life, which is not something that can be measured, right? It's not something that can even be put into words per se. It's like for instance, like if we think about um, if we think about like art and beauty, if I could just describe to you in complete detail the all of the various physical features of a painting, and your brain was capable of processing this, does that mean that you've understood what perhaps makes that painting beautiful? No, what makes the painting beautiful is going to be impossible to describe in descriptive language. You have to experience it, right? And that to me is what it means to exist as a being in the world. And so speculation about God is not really meaningful. It's like describing the painting. Okay, why don't you just look at the painting and absorb it, right? Experience it as a being in the world. So that to me is like metaphysics is very, I think, pointless.
yeah,
Yeah, and epistemology is a little bit less pointless because we're like I'm like very interested in like uh meta sort of meta ethical questions too, which is like questions about like not ethics itself, but like questions about how we can meaningfully ground ethics in the world and stuff. But like that to me, like epistemology, if we study human knowledge, like asking questions like how we can know things, even that there is a certain degree of like it's just being people's opinions. But I think that that is more likely to lead you to sharpening your mindset. Whereas metaphysical speculation, I do think these questions are good to run through in your mind when you're younger. But I think that truly wise people will realize, this is just my opinion, of course, truly wise people will ultimately realize that the deepest mysteries of life cannot be put into words.
and how do you sort of balance, like you said, you're Catholic, right? How do you balance your Catholic beliefs with your philosophical beliefs? Because I imagine there'd be times where they're conflicting, right?
Not really. No, I would say a more difficult question is how do I balance my, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but how do I balance my personal life with my Catholic beliefs? Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
It's a more difficult series of things. But like I was saying before, I mean, I think that, so one of my favorite philosophers, Wittgenstein himself, was Catholic and was also a gay man, right? So like, how do we account for this seeming hypocrisy? I think what we have to understand is that we are all, by our very nature, sinful according to Christianity, and that in the eyes of Christ, all sin is evil. And so it is not the job of an individual human to judge the sins of another, right? Like we all have sin, right? So it's a matter of like by our very nature, we are sinful. We are saved according to Christian doctrine, not by virtue of anything we do in the world, but by the grace of Christ and accepting Christ as our personal Lord and Savior, right? Like, if that makes any sense, I don't know.
No, I know what you mean, and it's interesting because it's like, should you be still striving to avoid sin in your life if it's inevitable that you will commit sin?
Well, you should, yeah, you should. But the question is why, right? So, here's an here's an interesting, I think, sort of philosophical question in Christianity, right? It's like, what if it could be proved that adhering 100% to Christian doctrine would, in fact, guarantee eternal life in heaven in terms of like you get like a big house and a nice car in terms of material rewards? Would you then be correct in pursuing the faith for those reasons? And I think, personally, no. I think that you should be adhering to the faith because of your love for Christ and the world that he created, right? And so, and that you should not have faith because of a perception of a desire for rewards in the afterlife, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, and it's like, at someone's core, if you're only adhering to a certain rule set because of a promise of something greater afterwards, does that make you a bad person?
I don't think it makes you a bad person. I mean, I think it just makes you human. To me, that sounds very human, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But let me try to connect some what Bill said. I think that it is very normal as a person in the world to like want like material things, and like I just think that like the purpose of a religion should be to give your life some kind of deeper meaning beyond that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And for people that aren't religious, can you still, strive to have faith in other things that aren't, an almighty God? Like, well, because obviously yourself being Catholic, do you think everyone should sort of pursue a religious path, or do you think it's possible to do without religion?
I don't think that faith has much to do with your stated beliefs. I don't think so. Someone can tell you they're Catholic, someone can tell you they don't believe in God. I think a more deep and meaningful question is something that can only be known in the heart of each and every person, right? Like you live your life in a certain way. The way you live your life and how you make what you make of the world in your everyday life, I think that says more to me about your connection with God than any of your stated beliefs. If I met a person, there's many Christians out there that are, doing horrible things with their lives.
Yeah.
And there's many people that would say that they don't believe in God. And I think that, it's not about whether you say it. It's about the what's in your heart, right? And I think that we all have faith. It's just like we have faith and I think that you can be connected to God without saying it. Right? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you said like, what you feel in your heart and whatnot. So would you dictate someone based off of their actions? Like, is that how you would judge someone's character, based off of what they do rather than what they believe?
To some extent, but I don't think that would be more of a judgment of them as their character, right?
Yeah.
Not so much their. I think like faith has to do with what's in your heart, right? And I think that like what's honestly in your heart, right? Like, look, I'm Catholic, but that's not like how I look at every single thing in the world, right? So I think when I look at politics, I'm very secular. Like I'm not really interested in examining politics from a Catholic perspective per se. I'm interested in examining them purely from a material, like I want to weigh the material benefits and negatives, right? Yeah, like I'm not interested in like I wouldn't want like a theological government or anything. I would want a government that is capable of providing the best material prosperity for all of the people in the world, right? With a minimum of suffering and stuff, right? Uh, yeah. So I think that I'm not, I don't really, I don't think you have to believe in the religion that I believe in to be like a good person or to have purpose in your life. You know? I think for me, it's like if I would have a conversation with someone about it, mostly what I would do is just try to describe the sense in which it gives me a sense of uh, purpose and like what it adds to my life. And I would say this from the perspective of somebody who is like, I'm extremely imperfect, right? Like one of my favorite Catholic quotes is from St. Augustine, who said, God grant me chastity and temperance, but not yet.
Yeah.
Do you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that quote, right? Like, yeah, and I think it's so funny. And it's like, to me, that's a very human quote because it's like he knows that he's sinning. It's so hard to not want to sin, right? Like it's like there's like it's like a part of what it is to be human. But it's yeah. But anyway, so um, yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, so you mentioned before that you were saying you were swaying more from philosophy more towards politics.
Yeah.
What sort of created that change?
Actually caring about stuff that makes a difference. Philosophy doesn't change anything. Philosophy is just fucking nerds in academia arguing over the dumbest shit, and nothing ever changes anything. Whereas politics and stuff actually, every single day, people's lives are affected in a very real way by political decisions.
So can you apply philosophy to politics, or is it almost a completely separate matter?
Well, I mean, like some people would argue that politics is one of the branches of philosophy, right? Like, and to some extent, I think it absolutely there is like a sort of a funnel from philosophy to politics, right? So Karl Marx was, for instance, influenced by Hegel, who was himself influenced by Immanuel Kant, right? So, and this is like clearly like philosophical like pipeline, so to speak, right? So, and then we can say like many of the major states of the the last century were influenced by Karl Marx, right? Soviet Union, China, which still exists, North Korea, Vietnam. These are in Vietnam. You can drive around, you can still see posters of Karl Marx everywhere. You know, like uh, I've seen massive posters of Frederick Engels and Karl Marx, right? So, and that's a man who was a Hegelian. So clearly there's a philosophical pipeline there. But I think, to be honest, I don't think we really need to have conversations about Hegel's philosophy to have conversations about the optimal allocation of resources in a modern society. Yeah. I don't, it's like, maybe if we really want to go deep into the woods on it, we can, but it's like, I don't think it's really like the best use of our time.
Yeah, and you sort of mentioned throughout this conversation a few of your favorite philosophers, but who do you subscribe to the most? If there was one person you said.
I mean, I wouldn't say like I'm an adherent of anybody, but I mean, I like Wittgenstein a lot. I like Wittgenstein. I mean, if you count Dostoevsky as a philosopher, I like Dostoevsky. I like Richard Rorty. I like William James. I like lots of people, but yeah, I mean, I would say like Wittgenstein and Dostoevsky are probably my two favorites.
So what's Wittgenstein's philosophy?
So he was mainly interested in trying to, I mean, he had a very wide range of things he was interested in, but I think one of the main things is that he was interested in trying to make sense of what it means to say that any statement in language actually means something. Like so for instance, if I say something, if I say that tree is green, right? Whatever, right? He's interested in analyzing in what way can we evaluate the meaning of that statement. And his philosophy went through, most people would say there are two stages of Wittgenstein. He had the early stage and the later stage. I think this distinction is a little bit exaggerated, but because I think there is a lot of continuity in his thought. Early stage Wittgenstein was his main theory was the picture theory of language, so that the meaning of a word is in reference to its capacity to act as a representation of a directly observable object in reality, right? So, for instance, if I say tree, okay, I can point to a tree, right? As a car, I can point to a car, right? But if I say, I don't like Taylor Swift's music, where do I point to that in reality?
Yeah.
Right. So what he would say is, if I say I don't like Taylor Swift's music, he would say, well, that's just like your opinion, man. You know, it's just like your opinion, right? So it's not, he would say it's meaningless. And if you understand what he's saying, then it means that all of his philosophy is meaningless. The fuck is the point of all this, right? Where do we point to any of the things you're saying in reality? And so he gives this analogy of a ladder. He says, my words here, once they have been understood and can be used like a ladder to climb up to a higher level of understanding, and then you can kick the ladder down, you don't need it anymore. So really what he's fundamentally interested then, and I think a lot of people miss this, is in raising people's perspective to, maybe we could say, a higher level of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
I would say so. He wants to be able to say that a statement has sense. Is it sensible or is it nonsensical, right? But like ultimately what happens is, if you follow what he's saying, really it highly limits language. It can only he basically limits language to only being capable of describing the physical world. And then he says in the book, this is like very religious Catholic man, right? So he says in the book, this leaves so many things that we can't speak about.
Yeah.
And so he says, what we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence.
Yeah.
And so what he means when he says what we cannot speak about, he's not saying you can't say anything about it. He's saying you should not attempt to we should not attempt to speak philosophically or metaphysical speculation about these things. The Bible, for instance, is he famously said, the poetry of Catholicism is beautiful beyond description, but any attempt to form a philosophical system out of them is offensive. So what he's saying is like, what we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence. We should not attempt to have 100% certainty about these things when we speak of them.
Yeah.
No, it is very un-Christian to say that you have 100% certainty that God exists.
Yeah.
I think anyone that says that, this is just my opinion, I think you fundamentally miss what it means to have faith. What it means that there must be a seed of doubt. Otherwise, you cannot say that you have faith. If someone could prove to me 100% that God exists in a scientific way and Jesus is up there in heaven and all this stuff, I don't have faith. I have proof. You've shown it to me. Faith doesn't exist anymore. It's impossible. And if I don't have faith, what's the point of the religion, right?
And I think that also links back to the whole thing of as you were saying, like Jesus and anything like that. There was everyone denied had faith, like he had faith in the sense of completely dedicating his life to those certain things in the human form, and everyone was like, "No, you're wrong," and died for that faith. So, but I think what you were saying before about you can't describe those things. What we're saying, you can't describe them because you should just leave it. It's more. Is it more in the sense of those things that you experience can be only experienced in a human form. You shouldn't try to describe it. You just have to live life and understand it through living life and those experiences.
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I think that there's a some years ago on this philosophy forum, there was this meme that I really liked. It was a picture, a little kid drew a picture of a person on a hill and there's a pretty rainbow, and the picture says, "Stop trying to understand life and just enjoy it." And someone put that on the forum and said, Wittgenstein 101. Like Wittgenstein's whole thing is he's actually trying to get you to stop doing philosophy. He's like, stop doing philosophy and just like experience life, right? Now, the later Wittgenstein, one change in the later Wittgenstein is that he changed his theory of language from the picture theory, which is not wrong, but is rather inadequate to describe language. He said this is just one way language functions. He instead says later on that the meaning of a word is its use in language. So what this means is if I point at a balloon and I say it's red, and then you say, yes, I agree, that balloon is red, we are not in fact describing a fact about reality. What we are describing is our shared perception of an external phenomenon, right? Which is a little bit different. I don't want to get too deep into what that means, but like ultimately then language becomes not about an attempt to describe objective reality, but instead becomes about our capacity to communicate and solve problems together,
Mm.
right? Which an aspect of that is going to be very similar to saying we're describing external reality. Like, so for instance, if a scientist said to me, my work is describing external reality, I would really not argue with him. Although I think if we get very deep into the woods on that, philosophically, that's not actually what's happening. But I think it's as close to that. It's so close to that, there's no point in really arguing about it, right?
So, from a philosophical standpoint, if you had to recommend 5 books, what would you recommend?
Uh, okay. Okay. It depends on what they want to get into, but I would say go buy the book. It's a very old book, but it's really good. It's basically written for like children, but it's really good. By Brian McGee. It's called The Story of Philosophy. It's just a very basic introductory text to like Western philosophy. I think it's really good. I read this when I was like 13 years old, and it was like a really good introduction for me to philosophy. But I still think it would be good for adults. Like I think it's really good. I recommend this book to everybody. Like for years, I've recommended this book, and then I'll just get books that I like.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be philosophy, just books that you think can teach people some things.
Yeah, I think
The Bible.
the Bible. Yeah. I mean, you got to read. I think Dostoevsky is just so good. Like, just got to read as much Dostoevsky as possible. Like, if you aren't moved by Dostoevsky's story about Christ's Christmas tree, so if you can read the story in like 5 minutes. It's a really short story. Christ's Christmas tree, one of the best things I've ever read in my life. You know, and then for Wittgenstein, if you want to get into Wittgenstein, you should start with Ray Monk's The Duty of Genius, which is a biography of him, which is really, really good. And then if you want to get into his actual writing, you can read the Tractatus. But the Tractatus, I think you should first read The Duty of Genius because the Tractatus is a little bit difficult, but it's really good. Like especially the later parts of the book. He gets into a lot of religious and like philosophical stuff about religion that is really, really good later in the book. That is one of my favorite books of all time, but it's very difficult.
So, on books, do you read a lot, Rob?
Yeah, I read like a lot. I have 3 books in my bag right now. Yeah.
Yeah, what are you reading at the moment?
So I'm reading Watership Down, which is like one of my favorite books ever. I'm reading the Bible, and then I have a book. I'm reading about the history of economics.
I'm going to ask you a couple more jiu-jitsu. Sure. Well, if that's okay. So you said you started, like, you grew up in New York, is that correct? In Long Island?
Yeah, I'm from Long Island.
Yeah. So how old you first started jiu-jitsu?
So the first time I ever did it, I was 13,
Mhm.
but I really didn't start but then I did more wrestling after that. I did high school wrestling. I did middle school and then high school wrestling. And then I started like more like regular consistent training when I was 18 after wrestling ended. But I did a little bit like one summer when I was 13 leading into wrestling. So I was more interested in jiu-jitsu, but it wasn't free like wrestling was. So, yeah.
So what's the culture of wrestling like in America, and how would you compare that
Oh
to
yeah,
jiu-jitsu?
fit into this. Yeah.
I don't even know. I'm not sure how to answer this. Like, it's just like,
Something you do, right?
I mean, it's not like, I mean, I'm from New York. We're not like Iowa country boys where everyone's wrestling or whatever. Like,
The Iowa Shield.
yeah, it's more like a niche sport. I feel like I did it mainly because I wanted to do jiu-jitsu, but I didn't have the money to do it at the time. So I did a little bit of jiu-jitsu in the summer before, but then I was like, fuck, wrestling's free. Let me do that. So I did that.
Did you enjoy wrestling? Like, obviously, you know jiu-jitsu now. You know it for your leg entanglements. You know for like your aggressive guards and your passing. But what do you feel that wrestling gave to your jiu-jitsu career?
Nothing technical. I mean, obviously, certain things, maybe like hand fighting and arm drags to some extent. But I think the biggest thing that it gave me was a love for grappling. I enjoyed wrestling. I thought it was fun. Like, I wasn't even really that competitive. I was an okay wrestler, but I wasn't really like super focused on it the way. Like, look, I will say this. I trained really hard. I really did love it. I wanted to be as good as I could, but I wasn't like
So physical, right?
yeah, it's so
physical.
yeah, it's so physical, and I didn't really have I'm not from like a wrestling family. Like my dad never wrestled. I didn't really, I like struggle to train year round because in New York it's not really like the biggest sport. So it's like I think in other parts of the country they're training like year round. I did some summer camps and stuff which I enjoyed, but a lot of the summers I really struggled to be able to train because it just wasn't available to me. So
Do you think at this day and age, like, do you still think wrestling is really, really relevant in jiu-jitsu? You see the guys
yeah, of
like
course.
yeah,
Yeah.
B team all that, like, they're always talking about wrestling up. They're always talking about these wrestling in jiu-jitsu, and do you think as a competitor, do you find that that's still relevant today, or is it becoming more relevant?
No, I mean I think it's very relevant. I mean I actually think that personally I think people are now like getting a little excessive with it. I mean I think it's like at a certain point it's like guys we're not wrestlers. It's a different sport, right? Like yeah, I get to sometimes when I see guys they completely abandon like pulling guard and playing guard. They're shitting on pulling guard and stuff. It's like
No, that's what I'm talking about.
yeah, guys, it's a different sport.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you want to watch
Do you
wrestling,
find it hard against a wrestler though? Like, say if you get, like, have you come across that as an encounter, like as a jiu-jitsu player? Like, I've seen your style, I know your style,
not really.
and I imagine, like, does that come into play at all?
No, not really. I mean, I think if the kinds of people who are going to give me problems in jiu-jitsu matches are people who are good at jiu-jitsu. If you're
Yeah.
just a wrestler, like I went against a guy in a jiu-jitsu match at an ADCC Thailand. I went against this guy who was a really high-level international wrestler who had, this is what people told me. I don't know if this is true, but people told me that he had a competitive match with Jordan Burroughs.
What? Wow.
Yeah, this is like
That's
a
crazy.
Russian Dagestani guy. I heel hooked him in like 45 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, like I don't.
That's just the extreme of one in, right? Someone
Yeah.
who can develop a game which is well rounded and has the wrestling in it, and that's got to be.
But then he's just a jiu-jitsu guy at that point,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
Like, yeah. So it's like to me, it's like if you're like, oh, wrestlers are really giving me problems. All right, then you just suck at jiu-jitsu. Like if you can't beat a guy that like now if you're telling me okay he's got really good passing, he has really good submission defense,
Yeah.
he's got okay then that's not a wrestler anymore. That's a jiu-jitsu guy.
Yeah.
That's a jiu-jitsu guy who knows how to wrestle.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah.
What about a mentality thing though? Like, do you find that wrestlers have a bit more of a, win at all cost mentality versus a jiu-jitsu person, or at that high level, is it just much for muchness?
I think this is like a borderline urban legend of the internet. It's like I don't think this is real at all.
Really?
Like, yeah, I mean, look, I'm sorry, other Americans are gonna hate me for this, but
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
so tired of hearing about this. I'm so tired of hearing about like in the Midwest in America, you don't understand how elite we are. Then why did we get our asses kicked by Japan at the Olympics? Like, I'm sorry. Look, you guys can hate all the Midwest American guys can hate me all they want. I'm sorry, but I'm just so tired of this fucking like we have a different mentality over here. It's like, all right, well, it's not the mentality didn't do shit when the Japanese took like way more gold than us, all right? So and the Russians were fucking not even there. We were supposed to dominate and we fucking didn't, right? The Russians weren't there. Japan's beating our asses. Is it because Japan is just working really hard? They're working much harder than us, dude. Like at the end of the day, working hard is a very important part of every combat sport. But even more important than that is professionalism and how you approach it as an athlete, technique, strategy, right? It's a lot more than just just work really hard to fuck everyone up, right? Like,
But so you trained at B team.
yeah, I was
So-
there for a decent amount of time.
Yeah, so you know Nikki and Jay, did they dominate early because they were wrestlers, or are they just freak athletes and they would have been good either way?
Well, I mean, these are guys like neither of them were like ever high level competitive wrestlers, right? Like, I don't know. I don't even know how. I'm not exactly sure how far they went, but like neither of these guys was like Olympic athletes in wrestling, right? Like, these are jiu-jitsu guys who were. I don't know if I can say they're freak athletes, but they took to the sport. Obviously, their wrestling background was beneficial, but to say that being an elite wrestler will therefore immediately translate to having elite success in ADCC. I mean, Ben
I
Askren.
think it's more so like helping. Like if you've done wrestling, you just understand base. You understand certain things that are definitely going to help, and you're going
It's
to
gonna
progress.
happen,
You're
yeah.
going to progress much quicker than someone off the street who has no bloody idea what base is, no one knows what a
course.
post is. I think that is what helps really. Like it's almost just a leg up.
For sure. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's definitely true. But what I'm saying is that it is an exaggeration to say,
Yeah.
like you take a wrestler and you just move him into jiu-jitsu and you teach him basic submission defense and he's going to fuck everyone up. Ben Askren was the
Yeah.
Olympic wrestler representing America. He did ADCC. He lost first round, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
How did he lose?
Pablo Popovich toe holded him.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like Pablo Popovich, who's not known for his leg locks, right? Like, so
Just opportunities to, right?
I've seen the match. once years ago. I don't really remember it,
Yeah.
but my point is that it's like wrestling is beneficial, obviously, but you're not going to just be a wrestler and then come into jiu-jitsu and just be a dominant athlete. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like if you're having success in jiu-jitsu competitions, it's because you're training jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the long and short of it. And if you are talent, like people will say to you, "No, I'm just a wrestler." Like I think this is just like I'm just a wrestler. This is just like a troll.
Yeah.
I don't like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're just trolling jiu-jitsu people,
Yeah.
while simultaneously in reality being a jiu-jitsu person, right? Like yeah.
So obviously you did wrestling when you were younger, and you've done jiu-jitsu for more of your life than you have wrestling.
Yeah.
But what would you say is harder?
I also don't like harder in like an idiotic sense is wrestling. Like I did middle school and high school wrestling. We trained like fucking retards. Like it was not intelligent training. Like was that more physically difficult? Yes, but I don't really think that was better training. Like so in that sense, I guess wrestling, but it was also retarded. So
So a lot of people like, so we had a Commonwealth wrestler mission for Australia, Dion, who teaches their classes and stuff, and like in wrestling, because it's so physical, people shy away from it, like in a jiu-jitsu sense. Yeah. Well, that's here in Australia, right? Like in but yeah, people shy away from it because of that physicality.
yeah, maybe I don't know. I mean, yeah, probably to some extent that's true. Yeah.
So what's the meta in jiu-jitsu now if it's not wrestling? What are these high level guys doing that's putting them a step above everyone else?
Just being good at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
it's
it's simple as that.
It's as simple as that. I don't think there is any like everyone wants like what's the hack?
That time,
Yeah, I don't want to actually be good at jiu-jitsu. How do I just hack and beat everybody? You don't. That's the answer. Okay, you just have to be good at jiu-jitsu. You're
there's
not
levels to levels, right? Like everyone's got another level. Like you think you're at the level, and there's another level to that level. Like
you're not
even unknown guys, man, that you don't know, you've never heard of. It doesn't mean that in a little gym that there can't be that guy who's going to beat your ass. Like,
Yeah.
I know that, right? Like,
Well, so what I'm saying is you cannot win ADCC or CJI or IBJJF or WNO events without just being good at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
That's like Tanquinho, who won ADCC, didn't win because he figured out, this one loophole that jiu-jitsu guys don't want you to know. He just won because he was good. Yeah.
You've come to Australia. Is this your first time in Australia? Have you been before?
No, this is my third time, I think, or fourth time, actually. Yeah.
And you're going to Sydney. Whereabouts are you going to be training in Sydney?
So I'll be training at Sydney West Martial Arts. And yeah, that's really the main reason I'm here is that gym. I really want to have a run at doing well at trials. And, look, man, I've done trials 5 times. I've worked really hard. I'm 33 years old. I look back at my career. I think I've not done as well as I would like to have. And I would really like to have a gold medal at trials. And that's why I'm here to train at Sydney West, because I think that gym is really, really good. I trained at that gym 1 week before, and I thought to myself, this is the place that I need to be if I want to have a real shot at doing well at trials. And so
is that out of everywhere in the world? You made that decision.
yeah, out of everywhere in the world. I don't think there's
What makes that such a strong belief in it?
So I think that different athletes are going to strive or succeed in different kinds of environments. And I think for myself, I do best in a certain kind of environment that Sydney West is very good at facilitating.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And is that based off your previous experiences then?
Yeah, I mean, I've trained. Yeah, well, training there. Yeah,
Yeah.
and knowing the coach and Luke Martin, the coach, and the
Yeah.
athletes there and
So
stuff.
Luke Martin not though.
I don't know. I'm not
Okay.
sure. Yeah.
So what do you think of the Australian jiu-jitsu scene in general? Obviously coming from America where it's, then you guys in Brazil, probably the 2 best in the world. Like, how do you rank Australia amongst all the other countries?
I think number 3.
Really?
Yeah. For
Wow.
Sure. Yeah.
I hear that from quite a few international people. For us, I guess it's so young. Do you know what I mean? Like comparatively, like it's still really young. It's still exploding. The population is just not as big, right? So
Yeah.
it's very interesting hearing that. I've heard that from lots of people who've travelled and come to the gym, and I've talked.
Just look at who medals at ADCC.
Yeah.
What countries are they from?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's USA, Brazil, and Australia.
Yeah.
There's not many people from other countries that are medaling. If anyone actually, I don't know. Did anyone medal at the last ADCC that wasn't from one of those 3 countries?
Yeah, true.
I honestly don't think so.
No, not that I can think of. So when is ADCC trials?
So the first one for me is in Europe in September 6th in Poland. So that's the first one. Yeah, can't wait. Love Poland. Yeah, so I'll be going back to Poland for my third time.
Yeah.
For that, and then I don't think I'll do North American. We'll see, maybe. I just don't want to. I don't want to cut weight to 66 twice in the span of 2 months.
So what do you normally walk around at?
I'm like 77 right
Yeah.
now. Yeah, yeah. I have to bring my weight down a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then the next trials for me will probably be January. I mean, look, I hope I win the first one.
Yeah.
But I'm big on long-term planning, right? So
Yeah.
I think like next European trials likely be January and February. So look, I have 4 chances, right? I could do European, North American, and each of those is 2 times. So, my kind of some tentative plan right now in my head is do 2 European, 1 North American.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like my plan. Hopefully, I don't even have to.
And who do you look up to as like someone of your style, someone you really study the most?
The number one grappler that I like is John Satava. He's probably my I don't want to say like my favorite ever. I mean, like, there's a lot that I like, but like I really like John Satava.
What is it about him?
I like that his style is very control based.
Yep.
There's not a lot of like he works to reduce the amount of chaos that happens in a match.
Yes.
His style is very predictable. I like the predictability of it because I think that good jiu-jitsu, as much as possible, should be controlling and predictable.
Like flawless, forcing them and funneling them into
Yeah.
predictable actions, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I just really like his passing. I like his passing a lot. I like his wrestling up.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm like a big John Satava fan. Yeah.
Awesome.
What is your favorite submission and what is your favorite pass?
Favorite submission is inside heel.
Okay,
For sure.
apart from legs.
Apart from legs, probably it's gonna have to be the rear naked choke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just highest percentage.
It's just the highest percentage.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So you said you had trials coming up. I've don't really get the opportunity to speak to people preparing for trials often. So what's the preparation going to look like for you?
So I'm gonna be training 4 days a week at Sydney West, and then I'll be training 6 days a week at another gym that I'm gonna be teaching at. So I'll be there 6 days a week. Oh no, I'll be there 5 days a week at Sydney West 4 days a week. And so in total, I'll be training 6 days. I'll be probably training in total like 10 times a week, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then lifting weights 3 to 4. I still have to figure out my schedule. I'll be lifting weights 3 to 4, and then probably doing cardio twice a week, and then maybe yoga once or twice a week.
Yeah,
So I love hearing that, mate. I'd love to ask about your belief in how much emphasis should you put into strength training for jiu-jitsu, and what should you be looking at? Like, 'cause that's so broad. Like, that's huge. And some people say, heavy lifts, and then some people are going to say functional movements. So, what do you focus on?
So I'm not a strength and conditioning coach, so this is just my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. My opinion is that I think trying to maximize athletic gains is like a fool's errand. I'm never going to become Dorian Olivares, all right? It's
Yeah.
not going to happen, okay? What I can do to the best of my ability is increase strength and cardio.
Yeah.
I think those are the 2 things that we can more directly influence, right? So
Yeah.
strength benefits us in terms of, just like, it's pretty obvious how it helps us. And it also helps reduce injuries. So that's like my main focus in the gym when I'm lifting. And then cardio, obviously, like the benefit is also pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And I think these are things that you can more directly have control over based on working hard. Versus, I think sprints are good, and I've been reading about them, and I might start incorporating them in my cardio days and stuff. But that being said, I think I could do sprints every day for the next year. I don't think I'm gonna turn into, Dorian in terms of speed. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
That's an interesting point. Like, what do you do for cardio? Like, I know myself, I came from boxing and it was just road work. Right? How should a jiu-jitsu athlete be preparing and get better cardio?
I just do what one of my friends tells me that he's a strength and conditioning guy. I'm just doing like the assault bike. Hits what he recommends, so that's what I've been doing.
And how much time are you putting in this up? Like, are you doing short bursts? Are you doing long bursts?
22 minutes. And I to be honest, I haven't done it in a couple weeks. I don't remember the exact breakdown of the because I've been busy moving here and stuff. So I don't remember the exact breakdown of how it works. It's like sprints and rest periods and sprints and rest periods. But yeah, he wrote it out for me, and so I've done it a couple times when I was in Vietnam, and that's what I'm going to be using here.
And what about diet? Is diet an important part as well?
Yeah, it is, but unfortunately, mine is not very good. So. That's why I'm 77 kilos. Yeah,
But you're a solid 77.
yeah. I need to eat more healthy. I mean, like, look, I'll say this: certain cultures really emphasize healthy eating and stuff. I think Southern Italian culture is not so much. Okay.
Plenty of carbs.
Yeah, lots of carbs. Very little discipline about what we're eating. So.
So you're in Australia for the next 6 months. Is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to being in Australia?
All of the trips back to Vietnam that I already have plans for.
Yeah, you go Australia. Good work. You've done well.
Just the training, man. Yeah. No, like I'm actually going back to Vietnam in 2 weeks, just for the weekend. Yeah. So I'm flying out Friday and I come back Sunday.
So have you lived in Sydney before?
I never lived there, but I've visited twice. I've been to Perth once and Sydney twice, and then now this is, I guess, my third time in Sydney.
Is this your first time being in Queensland?
I guess so.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Isn't this all Queensland?
Yeah, it depends who you ask, really. I think. Some people would prefer we weren't the Queenslander, but you know.
That's a whole other conversation.
Exactly right. Well, it's like, where have you enjoyed competing most?
I don't know. I'm not sure that there's a single tournament I've done that I've enjoyed like the most, honestly. Maybe.
Or that you looked or you look forward to because there might have been other competitors in there that you analysed and that you wanted to obviously
I think
against.
I think one of my best performances, one of the ones I'm most proud of that I've ever had was at ADCC Bali in Indonesia, which I think that was like maybe a year and a half ago. And I won the 66 kilo division. So I cut weight for that. So I cut weight down to that, and I beat 2 guys. And then in the finals, I had a really tough match that I won. Very, very close match that I literally went and vomited in the garbage can right afterwards. And like, I was pretty banged up and stuff. And like, I was pretty happy with the day. I think that I did really well in the matches, and I look, and another thing that made that day really nice was that there were like a ton of Italian guys there, and they saw the Italian flag next to my name on the scoreboard, and then just started like cheering for me. And then afterwards, like hung out with these guys.
Yeah,
They were just super nice, and like, yeah, like that made it really nice. And we got a picture of all the Italian. There were a bunch of Italian guys that had never even met each other. We all got a picture together and stuff. And
That's
like,
awesome.
yeah. So yeah, that was a good day. Yeah, for sure. And like, I think it was one of the rare times that I've actually cut weight well. I'm pretty bad at cutting weight. I need to get better at it. But that day I cut weight pretty well.
Yeah.
So,
Just going off of Lockie's question there, just about competing, is there any particular rule set you like competing?
I just like points. I don't like no points. I think it like makes it. I'm not a big fan of like submission only. I like points. My favorite would be ADCC without the no points period. If you could do that, that would be the best. That's my favorite. And get rid of the negative for pulling it overtime.
I mean, that was everything I had, guys, unless there's anything else you had. Awesome, Robert. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, man. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.